she had this strange thing that she wanted to be under watch care. And I didn't have a clue what watch care was. It took me a little while before I figured out that watch care is when you have a minister that looks over you, even though you may not have a church home or whatever. And she just wanted somebody to be there for in case something happened. Well, you guys are under watch care, okay? Because before I could hardly get in the shower this morning, Reverend Ann is on the phone, and she's calling me, and she said, Michael, this is a historic Sunday, and I want you to make sure that my folks know, and that you know that I'm praying for them, that I'm caring for them, I'm concerned about their comfort. So because she's watching out for you guys, I don't have to change what I was planning to say. You're under watch care. Okay? Now, I'm also under watch care because there's sometimes in my life when you ever have times when things just go really well, or you know, you wonder how you survived that just missed accident or whatever just might have happened. Well, in my mind, I kind of play with my imagination, and I imagine that, well, I'm living in answered prayer. You know, and I imagine that it's 1953, and my grandmother is huddling around a little baby, and she's saying, oh, I hope everything goes great for this baby, and she's praying for me. You know, it's sort of like she's putting it on the schedule, and it comes out later on. So later on, when I need that somehow or another, you know, she's been gone, but that prayer is there, so I'm like living under answered prayer. It's sort of the same thing as being under watch care, just like you guys. So you need to know that Reverend Ann is not here, and even though she should be on vacation and not being concerned, she has all of you guys under watch care because she's concerned about you, she's concerned about the nation, and she's just a good person like that. Good enough?
Yes.
Cool. So what I came to talk to you about, what I don't have to change is this guy, Spinoza. You know, when Einstein was asked that question, he said, well, I believe in the God of Spinoza. Well, that's not exactly accurate, so I don't like to use a lot of notes, but I'm going to give you guys this because I want you to get the exact quote, okay? It was 1929, and Albert Einstein, the great scientist, mathematician, and all that, he was giving an interview with the New York Times. And they always like to catch scientists on this God question, you know, to see if their science matches up with their God and their belief. And they asked him, say, so do you believe in God? And Einstein said this. He said, I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists, not in a God who cares, who concerns himself with the fates and the actions of human beings. A different kind of God. He said he believes in one who believes in, that's in everything, okay? It was a different kind of view of a God for people back then. And that was Spinoza's thing. Well, everybody has to come up with their own view of God, and I'm of the belief that none of us really have the exact view of God. It's sort of like fingerprints, all the way down to our fingerprints. It might be just a little bit different. But we all come up with one. And if we're really fortunate and we're blessed, well, we have parents who guide us along the way and at least make sure that we get started. We may not end up with where our parents had us up, you know, but at least they get us started. Now for me, my parents made sure that I was started in the right way to find God. They made sure. My mom and dad, they split up when I was 4 years old. So I lived in a small town in Leavenworth, Kansas, and my dad remarried, so my stepmom and my mom both lived in the same town, in a small little town, and I would see them both. And both of them were big mucky mucks in their own churches, okay? And they still are, always have been. So with my dad and my stepmom, I would go to the Baptist church. It was called Independent Baptist Church, big old white church. And there, God was in that church, okay? Because God was a Baptist. And God would shout, God would scream, God would get happy, and God would preach. I mean, not like I talk, but God would do some preaching. And God was, sometimes God would be real mad and real evil. And God was really watching out to make sure that you didn't do a whole bunch of things. That was a different kind of God over at that Baptist church, you know. But that was what it was doing over there. And in my small town, and the way black churches run kind of late and long, well, even as a kid, I always went to 2 services. I'd go to the Baptist church, and then I'd have to get my little butt over to my birth mom's church, which was Bethel AME, okay? AME stands for African Methodist Episcopalian Church, okay? Now, the God at that church was a little different God now. I didn't jump up and shout a whole lot, you know, but God had a different perspective at that church. See, my mom's church sits high up on a hill, looking over the Missouri River, okay? So you can be at that church and you can look over from Kansas into Missouri. And there's a big steeple at the top of the church. And when I was a kid, they would talk about how there would be a lantern in the church. And back in the old days of slavery, well, enslaved people would literally cross the river to come to that church. When we were kids, we would go play in the basement, and there was a basement and a sub-basement. And the sub-basement was a place where they would hide the slaves and stuff. So at that church, God was not only solemn, but God was historical. And God would be the guy who was going to come and change and save people. You know, it was a different kind of God at that church. You know, and he was kind of cool too. But either way, you know, both of those guys, they had a poor kid like me just confused. Because I was at school. And in school, well, there was a different God or no God or something just different was going on there. And I love those liberal arts, you know, history and sociology, geography, anthropology, all those things. Well, God didn't quite show up the same place there like he had at church. So I was always confused, you know, and the stories didn't quite always fit out. But I think all of us have to find our own way there and find our own way about God, because God has seemed to have changed and been a little bit different over time. You know, in the beginning, if you go back, now this isn't my timing, okay? But if you go back with what scholars, they say, if you go back 3,000 or 4,000 years before the current era, okay? Before Christ, okay? If you get that far back, well, people had a different kind of thing with God then, okay? When we were like nomads and people were wandering around, well, we had a different kind of belief in God. God was in the sun, and God was in the rivers, and God was in the trees, and we had an entirely different relationship with God. And we did that for, I mean, thousands of years. That's how people thought. That's what God was. And then you move a few thousand years later, and you get up into the time of the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians and the Assyrians. Well, they had an entirely different God, too. They had Horus and Isis and those kinds of gods that represented all types of things like wisdom and afterlife and all different things that humans might experience. You know, it was another way of doing God. And that got you right up to, you know, the Greeks and the Romans. Now, you guys are really familiar with their gods. You know, those guys, they had a lot of gods. They had a whole bunch of gods. I mean, the Greeks, I mean, they had a god for everything. They had a god for love. They had a god for war. They had a god for water. They had a god for sun. They had everything. And the Romans did the same thing. They copied a lot of the Greek gods, but they still had the same ones, Zeus, Apollo, all that same stuff. You know, a whole host of gods. And then we get up to Abraham. Now, Abraham, he says, shoot, all them gods, we don't need to have 10, 12, 15 different gods. He said just one God. One God would do, Yahweh, just one God. And that's how we got into this monotheism, okay? And we said just one God. Don't have to have all the other ones. Now, we all look at that one God a little differently. You know, it started off with, you know, Judaism. We get that Jewish God. And the Jewish God ends up leading you to the Christian God, because now their God's a little bit different because they add Jesus into the mix. And then they say, well, you know, the Son of God, and if you believe in him, well, that's how you're going to get this everlasting thing. So they even had a different God. And then you go, you know, 700 years into the new era. Well, you got the Muslims coming up and Islam saying, you know, we got another God. And Allah is the real God. And Muhammad is the real prophet. I mean, God is making a bunch of changes. And all these are good gods. You know, I don't have a problem with none of them. It's just that God is evolving and God is changing, and we've got a different kind of God. You know, if you get past that, you know, and not only look in the East, well, now you get an entirely different view of God. You know, you start with the Hindus, and the Hindus had a bunch of gods too, but they weren't quite the same gods like they had in the West. And if that wasn't good enough, the Buddhists came along, and they say, well, we'll take what the Hindus are doing, but we're going to add a little twist to it, you know? And instead of honoring a God, well, we'll go with the teachings of Buddha, and they just did it an entirely different way. Everybody comes up with a different way of doing this God thing, you know? So It's not unusual or strange for a young child to be trying to figure out what this God stuff is about. So when I first heard this quote about Spinoza, I said, well, now maybe they might be onto something. That might be cool. Because see, I knew already from going to different churches and being around my mom and my stepmom that all of those different gods and all those different churches and all those different religions, all of them are relevant. And to me, all of them work. Some of them may not work for me, but I can tell you there are some people who believe in some things that I don't believe in that have made some miracles and made some things happen. So I don't doubt them. There's some Catholics, and I'm not Catholics, but they've got some saints that have done some stuff, and I'm not going to knock that. There's some Lutherans that have done some things. There's all types of people who believe all different types of things, and it's worked out for them. So I've always just been looking for the one that would work for me. So when I heard that quote about Spinoza, I said, hey, this might be a good one. So I started checking out to see about who is this guy, okay? His name was Baruch Spinoza, okay? Born November 24th, 1632. Now, he was Portuguese and Jewish, but his people got ran out of Portugal. Did you know there was a Portuguese Inquisition? Just like the Spanish Inquisition. So if you was serving the wrong God, you kind of got pushed aside, and that's what happened to his grandparents. And they ended up going up to Amsterdam because the Dutch were a little bit more lenient with those kind of things. And so that's where he grew up. His father was a rich merchant, so he got the best of education, the best Jewish education that money could buy. Learned Hebrew, learned all about the stars, learned everything. But he was one of those kids. He probably reminded me of myself. He questioned people, and what the rabbis were saying just didn't fit with what he was learning in school, I guess. And he kept questioning and bringing up different topics. And you know what they did? They kicked him out of the church. Excommunicated. He was only 24 years old. And they threw him out of the church for what he believed and what he said. Now, I didn't know it until my grandson told me, but your brain is not even fully developed till you're 25. So what were they expecting? But they kicked him out, okay? And he went on from then, and back in those days, when you were excommunicated, that meant that you were not just out of the church, you were out of the community, you were out of everything, out of a job, everything. So he pretty much became a lens grinder, a strange job. I don't even know if they do that kind of stuff anymore. But you take a piece of glass, and you either have a diamond or a short piece of metal, and you just grind that glass down to what you want to use it for lens, for microscopes, for glasses, for all the things that we use glass for. That was his day job. And then in the evening, what he would do, he would write, and he would study philosophy, and he would discuss it with his friends. Now, he was a little scared, so he didn't write a lot of books, while he was still alive. He only wrote about 4 or 5 books, and his friends published those books after he died. The best one that they talk about is the one called Ethics, because ethics is where he talks about God and how he describes God. He's got an entirely different view of God. Really, it's not a different view. It's just a different wording. There's not a whole lot new under the sun. I don't care where you're talking about. But he had a different view. He saw God in everything. Everything, okay? His idea was that God is like the substance, okay? The substance of anything and everything that exists. So anything that exists, then it's a manifestation of God, okay? So if you see a tree, then that tree is a manifestation of God. If you see a flower, the same thing. If you see a rock, a building, anything that you see, anything that exists, just by the fact that it exists, it has to have substance. And that substance he calls God. It's like nature being in everything. God is in everything, and that's how he sees it. And that's an infinite God. So that's an infinite number of ways that God can appear. So all the different things that we see, all the different ways that we see, all those are different appearances of God. Now, that's kind of cool to me, okay? Because it does a whole lot of things. It offers you a lot of different possibilities. One, it means that all those other religions and all that they're talking about, they can all be right. Because they all have an essence of God in them. So they can all be right. But better yet, in people, it even works. Because that means it's God in you, and God in you, and God in you, and God in you, and God is in all of us. No matter how you choose to show up. And there's an infinite number of possibilities and ways to show up, and no matter which way you show up, you still are showing up as God. You just cannot help that. Now, you know what that does? One, that should make you feel pretty good about yourself. You know, because you can't be too fat, too skinny, too dark, too light, too nothing. You can't, you know, because you just God, so that's all cool. And no matter what anybody else says, you know, that's good. You are good. And you don't have to change a thing. And when you look at other people, the exact same thing is true. You know, no matter who you look at. And that can get kind of scary. You know, that person that you look at and don't like and you're being mean to, well, you know, that's just another way that God shows up. You know, and you got to be cool with that because you never do know. That situation that you think, oh man, the devil, whatever that is really on me. No, no, no. You got to hold on to that thought because that includes God too. And you wait around till tomorrow, you might find the good behind that. You've got to be able to see things differently. And the way Spinoza was saying it, well, God is in everything. I really like that. You know, I've got a bonus grandson who he's in the Coast Guard. He's in training right now, and he's going through a whole bunch of stuff that makes it really tough being a grandparent. It's like having a kid at war and stuff. But you know, kids and people could not kill or shoot other people if they saw the God in them. Amen. Part of what we do with basic training in the military and all that is we make sure that our young people, our military people, see that enemy as a demon. Whether we call them Japs or Spics or whatever we do, we make sure that we demonize that person. Because we've got to demonize them because you can't kill somebody that you see God in. So you got to see him as a demon. So if you look at the world like Spinoza sees it, you probably have a lot less wars, a lot less conflict, a lot more people trying to get along and get together. Because they all see that God is in everybody and in everything and in every situation. I think that's a great way to see the world. I think that's a great way to live. Most folks, you know, they think that they gotta be right. It's gotta be their way or the highway. They know the right God. They got the right religion, you know, and then they surely don't act like it. I mean, you can't be very godly and very holy moly when you're putting somebody else down for what they believe. You know, like I said, I've seen tons of people who believe different from me. And I don't care really what you believe. I don't care if you believe in Spinoza, Confucius, or whatever. What I've learned is that the power is in the belief itself. Yes. It's in the belief itself. And if you're at unity, well, just in the name says that, you know, you got to believe that all this stuff is united, all this stuff comes together. You've got to believe that God is in everything. That's what you're saying. That's what you're a part of. And then you need to make sure that you act accordingly. And that means seeing God in everything. Now, Spinoza had one more thing that he had that went along with his philosophy of God, too. And he called it, what we all know, cause and effect. So he believed that there was a cause for every effect. Everything that we see that is a manifestation of God, there's that cause. And there's a cause and an effect and a cause and an effect and a cause and effect. And you can go either forward or backward in time, and there will always be another cause and another effect. Now that can be really powerful if you think about it. Now some people, they get a bad feeling on that because with Spinoza, he said, well, that means there's no such thing as free will. You know, that it's kind of determined. But it's determined, and it's a lack of free will depending on how you look at it. When you see it as a cause and effect, well, that's what was determining it. The cause was determining that effect. Now, you have some choice in the causes that you put out there, I think. So even if things are already going left because of all the cause and effect and the things that you've done that way, well, you can have a new cause and take things the other way, okay? So if you've been being crazy all your life, well, you can change that. You can have another way. You can go another direction. If you've been always being mean and nasty to people, well, you can change that. You don't have to continue just to look at the world and to understand the world. You know, if you put those two things together, that there's cause and effect, and God is in everything, then that just about answers all your questions. When you look out into the cosmos and you see big stars and galaxies, etc., you know, that's just another way that God shows up. It manifests in another way. You know, there was a cause and there was an effect. Something happened and now we have stars. You know, I may not always understand the cause, but I know if I see the effect that there must have been a cause behind it. I may not always understand how you act, but if I can see the effect, I know there's a cause behind it. And if I take the time, instead of just reacting because you acted bad to me, maybe I can look a little deeper and see, well, what might be the cause? What could be the cause of them acting like they act? Maybe they act that way because they grew up in a Baptist church like I did. You know? Maybe they'd act differently if they came just from a Methodist church. You know, I don't know. But I do know that there's a cause and effect. And if we can do that, those are like laws and principles. You know, some people really do need a personal deity to hold on to make it through life. And I have no problem with that. And they see God with arms and hands and eyes, and God wraps his loving arms around. And that's okay with me. I have no problem with that. Some people see God in math and numbers and formulas, and I have no problem with that. You know, when Shirley was saying earlier about how unique we are, well, you know, if you do the math, you know, you can prove that with math too. You can look at the number of genes that people have and what it takes to make a human being. And scientists will tell you that up until now, there have been 100 billion people that have existed on the planet. 100 billion people. But if you took all the combinations of our genes that it takes to make a person, there are billions of people that never will even exist. That number gets to be that big. Billions that will never even exist, but still just one of you. Just one of you. That's a mathematical principle, and that's a law. Just like Spinoza's, those are principles, those are laws, and you can live by those. So for me, you know, the church of my mother's, they were cool. You know, I really do. I get kind of excited and like that spiritual thing sometimes too, because I think God is within, so I can deal with that Baptist stuff sometimes. You know, the AME thing, I mean, I am so much into being black in my culture that, hey, I love that. So I'm glad I have that in my background. But I was always a smart kid, and science does something for me. The science of your mind, the science of how people get along, all of those things, and that's what I like best about Spinoza. He thinks that there's logic and reason and that we can use just in how we get along. And if we see God in everything and God in everybody, and we're rational, well, it just makes sense that you treat people like you want to get treated. That's just a logical thing. You don't even need a God for that. Okay? So my job today was, one, to make sure that you know that there's different ways of looking at the world. I could care less if you pick a Spinoza or if you pick a Catholic or whatever you might pick. It's what you believe in that's going to make the difference. So if you pick something, live it and believe it. And right now, hey, we done picked unity, and we done picked that this is how we're going to be. I say, live it, be it. And meanwhile, know that Reverend Ann is watching you guys even when you don't see her. Just know that she is watching you. You know, she's like that guy at that Baptist church that used to be watching everything that you do. She's always there for you. She's always praying for you. And she's looking out for you even right now. So I've done my bit as far as she's concerned. I didn't get too political. I offered you comfort. I spoke about that big elephant that was in the room, and then I went on and talked to you about Spinoza. Hey, this is one of my favorite places to come to speak. I love coming here. I love sharing with you guys. If I'm successful, then I gave you some new information, told you something that maybe you didn't know. If I was really good, then I said it in an entertaining way that made you laugh, made you chuckle, that'll make you remember. And if I was really, really good, then I maybe inspired you so that you'll change the way you do things just a little bit. Most importantly, hey, I'm just glad that I get a chance to be here. So remember that God of Spinoza, and you guys have a great day. story.